Is Patrick Bateman just a fictional character, a disturbing yet contained creation from Bret Easton Ellis's novel American Psycho and its film adaptation? But what if I told you a chilling truth that publishing houses, film studios, and certain financial institutions have tried to keep hidden? The connections go much deeper than anyone has publicly acknowledged until now. This story doesn't start in the glamorous Manhattan of the 1980s, but in the sterile hallways of the Harrington Psychiatric Research Facility in upstate New York back in 1967. Patient records, sealed until 2018, reveal a subject known only as Patient B, a 19-year-old male admitted for what doctors called homicidal ideation with narcissistic traits. The attending physician, Dr. Malcolm Reeves, documented behaviors that would later seem eerily familiar to readers of American Psycho: obsessive grooming rituals, detailed monologues about consumer products, and violent fantasies specifically targeting women and the homeless. The facility closed abruptly in 1971 without any formal explanation. 3 staff members vanished without collecting their final paychecks. Patient records moved to state archives and were later classified. Patient B was either released or transferred. The records are intentionally unclear. What happened during those 4 years remains a mystery, except for one chilling note in Dr. Reeves' last entry. It read, "Subject has learned to present normal affect. His performative humanity convinces all observers except this examiner. I recommend continued observation." The board denied this request. In 1972, an unusual scholarship went to a student at Phillips Exeter Academy in New Hampshire. The Carson Foundation, a newly established group, funded it exclusively thanks to an anonymous Wall Street donor. The recipient's name was redacted from school records, but yearbook photographs show a young man with slicked-back hair and, as one teacher described, eyes that never seemed to reflect light properly. 3 students from his dorm reported missing items from their rooms. A janitor quit without explanation after an alleged confrontation with the scholarship student. The school nurse documented treating him for hand lacerations, consistent with repeated impacts against hard surfaces. By 1975, the trail led to Harvard University. Campus police reports document 4 separate incidents involving mutilated animals found near Winthrop House. No suspects were ever identified. Forensics determined the animals had been meticulously dissected with surgical precision. A student newspaper article from that time mentioned rumors about a business major who kept an elaborate journal detailing the incidents, but this journal was never found. University administrators refused to comment on these incidents when approached in 2019.
The graduating class of 1979 included multiple future Wall Street executives. Among the commencement photos, one figure stands slightly apart from his peers, his name notably absent from captions. 3 female graduates from that same year filed restraining orders against an unnamed male student. He had left detailed, violent messages on their answering machines. All 3 women eventually withdrew their complaints after receiving significant financial compensation from an anonymous source. The university's records of these complaints vanished during a routine archive purge in 1986. The first direct link appeared in 1980. Pierce & Pierce, a prestigious investment banking firm, hired several Harvard graduates that year. Employment records obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request revealed a vice president whose name was methodically blacked out. His human resources files noted his exceptional attention to detail and a rare ability to work without emotional interference. A secretary who briefly worked for this individual requested a transfer after just 1 week, citing uncomfortable workplace dynamics in her formal request. In the summer of 1981, the first of several disappearances occurred near the financial district. Charlene Wilkins, a sex worker known to frequent areas near Wall Street after midnight, was last seen entering a black car. Witnesses described it as expensive and immaculate. Police reports indicated minimal investigation. A detective's handwritten note discovered during a case review in 2000 simply stated, "Check with boys at PNP, probably entertaining clients again." Between 1982 and 1986, 7 more individuals vanished from the same area. All these cases remain unsolved. In 5 instances, witnesses described a well-dressed man in his late 20s. He carried what looked like business cards and approached victims shortly before they disappeared. None of the witnesses could recall his face clearly. One investigator termed this a psychological phenomenon or identity slippage in his unofficial notes. The East River incident of February 1983 briefly reopened these cold cases. A partial human torso washed ashore near the Brooklyn Bridge. Medical examiners determined the precise cutting indicated medical training or extensive practice. The case file was marked resolved after 3 days with no explanation. 2 detectives assigned to the investigation requested transfers immediately afterward. One resigned from the force entirely within a month, moving to rural Montana, where he refused all contact with former colleagues. A curious pattern emerged in reservation books from the exclusive restaurant Dorsia during this period. Every Thursday, a table for 2 was reserved under different names, yet security footage showed the same individual arriving alone each time. Restaurant staff described him as intensely forgettable, despite his designer suits and meticulous appearance. Michel Laurent, the maitre d' from that period, disappeared in 1987. He had mentioned to colleagues that a regular patron showed him something disturbing in the restaurant bathroom. His case remains unsolved. In 1988, Preston Walsh, a Yale University literature professor, began researching a book on wealth psychosis among young Wall Street professionals. His interview subjects included dozens of investment bankers. His research notes, discovered after his tragic death in 1991, contained repeated references to Subject Zero. This was an unnamed financial executive whose colleagues all provided contradictory physical descriptions despite working with him daily. Walsh's final journal entry read only, "He knows about the manuscript. He called from my own apartment while I was still inside it. How did he get my number? The phone never rang." The first manuscript of American Psycho appeared on editor Gerald Howard's desk in late 1989. Bret Easton Ellis claimed to have written the novel based on his observations of 1980's success. However, publisher Simon & Schuster abruptly canceled the book's publication, despite having paid a substantial advance. The official reason for canceling the novel cited its graphic content. However, internal memos leaked in 2005 revealed another story. They spoke of legal concerns regarding the source material and potential issues identifying unnamed parties. Random House eventually published the novel, but only after making numerous unexplained editorial changes. Pages of the original manuscript, reviewed by literary experts in 2010, contained 37 specific references missing from the published version. Among them was an address matching a real apartment in the Upper West Side,
where 3 different tenants reported break-ins between 1987 and 1990. There was also a design for a business card identical to those used by a specific investment firm at that time. Finally, there was a detailed description of a murder method that closely matched the unsolved disappearance of Wilkins. 3 weeks after the book's publication, a cleaning service discovered an abandoned apartment in the American Gardens building on 81st West Street. The space was paid for in cash through a shell corporation. Inside, the walls were covered in plastic. Cabinets were filled with industrial cleaning supplies. No fingerprints were found, despite thorough checks. The refrigerator contained nothing but bottled water and Clinique skincare products. Building security logs showed no records of anyone entering or exiting the apartment for the previous 6 months. Neighbors occasionally reported hearing Phil Collins music at an alarmingly high volume.
The adaptation of American Psycho faced similar mysterious disruptions. 3 different directors left the project, citing creative differences. Mary Harron eventually completed the film, but not before production halted for 17 days in November 1999. No explanations were given to the cast and crew. Christian Bale, who played Bateman, later mentioned in a 2008 interview that he partially based his performance on a man he met only once in a New York restaurant. That man described in detail how he would dismember Bale's body if society allowed it. Bale's publicist quickly clarified this comment as part of Bale's intense preparation for the role. During filming, there were 3 separate incidents where strangers matching Bateman's description were found on set. They always appeared near scenes containing violent content. Security logs showed no records of these breaches. When investigators checked, they found that the production assistant who reported one such incident had no employment record with the production company. The film's release in 2000 coincided with a series of unusual events in theaters across the country. In Chicago, a midnight screening was interrupted when all digital projection equipment failed simultaneously, displaying only static noise for 17 minutes before resuming, perfectly synchronized. In Boston, 3 different viewers reported seeing a figure matching Bateman's description appear in scenes where such a character did not exist. All 3 viewers later retracted their statements. Wall Street itself seemed to react to the film. Pierce & Pierce underwent sudden restructuring 2 weeks after the premiere, eliminating an entire division without public explanation. Employment records from that period were later lost due to what the company described as a server malfunction. Former employees refused to discuss the matter when approached by reporters. One simply said, "Some people were never really there, even when you saw them every day." The most disturbing connection surfaced in 2004. During renovations at a luxury apartment building on the Upper East Side, workers found a hidden space between walls. Inside, hundreds of detailed journals described murders identical to those in the novel. These journals, however, listed additional victims not found in the published book. Forensic analysis dated them between 1985 and 1989. The handwriting did not match any known samples in police databases. Shockingly, the journals disappeared from evidence 3 days later. The officer responsible for their safekeeping resigned without explanation and left New York that same night. In 2007, Bret Easton Ellis himself was briefly hospitalized, with his representatives citing exhaustion. However, hospital records showed he was treated for multiple lacerations on his hands and arms, which attending physicians described as defensive wounds. When questioned, Ellis insisted he had met himself at a book signing event, an encounter never recorded on security cameras. He later refused to discuss the incident, though he subsequently moved to a building with 24-hour security and installed additional locks on all doors and windows. A disturbing pattern also emerged among both readers of the novel and viewers of the film. Between 2000 and 2015, 27 individuals who publicly analyzed or critiqued American Psycho in academic journals reported receiving unusual business cards in the mail. Each card featured raised lettering, pale nimbus coloring, and a distinct watermark. None contained any identifying information beyond a phone number. When called, this number played only the sound of breathing, followed by detailed directions to the caller's current location. None of these incidents were ever fully investigated. The digital age added new dimensions to this strange phenomenon. Online forums discussing the film or novel frequently reported unusual activity. Threads would disappear, and users would receive private messages containing personal information that no stranger should know. In one documented case from 2012, a user's webcam activated independently during a discussion about Bateman's reality within the narrative. The recording, preserved before the user's account was deleted, showed only an empty chair in what appeared to be a high-rise apartment, with Hip to Be Square playing faintly in the background. Investigative journalists examined financial records in 2015, uncovering a curious pattern. Since 1980, an investment fund registered to a P. Bateman had achieved statistically impossible success, never experiencing a losing quarter despite market fluctuations. This fund operates exclusively through shell companies based in the Cayman Islands. Its beneficiaries include 3 publishing executives involved with American Psycho, 2 film producers associated with the movie adaptation, and the retirement accounts of 17 police officers formerly assigned to Manhattan's financial district. In 2018, a partial archive of the Harrington facility records became available through declassification. Researchers discovered that patient B had been part of an experimental treatment program codenamed Mirror. This program aimed to rehabilitate violent offenders through identity reconstruction. Notes indicate the process involved imprinting social camouflage and installing performative humanity protocols. The program's director, whose name remains redacted, noted in a final evaluation that the subject has transcended treatment parameters. He no longer imitates normal behavior. He has learned to weaponize perceived normalcy.
The most recent incident happened in 2022. A data analyst at a social media company found a strange pattern. Accounts discussing American Psycho had activity from one IP address. This address led to an empty office in the old Pearson Pears building. Security cameras showed no one entering or leaving that office for 3 years. Yet, internet activity continued without interruption. When investigators went inside, they found only a desk, a chair, and an old answering machine. The machine held 87 messages. Each message featured a different voice. They clinically described how to conduct perfect murders. The analyst who uncovered this pattern took a long leave and never returned to work. These connections paint a disturbing picture. It's not fiction inspired by reality. Instead, it's reality hidden by what we think is fiction. Patrick Bateman seems less like a made-up character. He's more like a way to contain a terrifying truth. He presents it through satire and exaggeration. The precise killer, obsessed with designer business cards, was never just a story. He was documented, studied, and then released. He became famous in a story made to seem too wild to be true. Those who looked too deeply faced strange problems. 3 journalists began looking into these connections in 2019. They all reported the same odd experiences. They would come home to find their apartments had been entered. Nothing was stolen, but all personal items were moved to slightly different spots. Their research notes disappeared. One found his mirrors slightly tilted. Another discovered every page in his notebooks creased in the same spot. The third simply stopped talking to colleagues. He was found 2 weeks later in his apartment, unharmed. He only repeated one phrase: "There are no more barriers to cross." Financial institutions stay silent. Requests for work records from investment firms in the 1980s are always turned down. Security footage from financial district buildings from that time has been destroyed or hidden. The NYPD Cold Case Unit will not admit any pattern connecting disappearances near Wall Street between 1980 and 1991. A detective briefly reopened these cases in 2016. He was moved to the traffic division after receiving what his supervisor called concerning personal letters at home. The most troubling part of this story isn't what happened back then. It's what keeps happening now. The pattern hasn't stopped. It has changed. Experts who study violent crimes in finance report odd things. Witnesses can't give clear descriptions of criminals. Evidence disappears from secure places. Investigation notes look altered between writing and review. Security cameras fail at key times. Digital records get corrupted in specific ways. This is not just a conspiracy theory, it's a documented pattern seen over decades of careful investigation.
The evidence exists in pieces, spread out on purpose. This prevents anyone from putting the whole story together. Patrick Bateman was never meant as pure fiction. He was a warning, hidden in plain sight. He was a predator presented as too extreme to be real, a form of cultural camouflage. Perhaps you're wondering why this information isn't more widely known. Think about the powerful groups protecting it. Consider the institutions that might be involved. What if Bateman wasn't just an odd case, but a blueprint? What started with one person seems to have become a method, a guide for others. They learned that the best way to hide is to be overly visible. The novel and film work like perfect containers. They present a terrifying truth as fiction, so extreme that recognizing the reality becomes impossible. Those who learn too much are dismissed by the very system meant to uncover the truth. Talking about the real Patrick Bateman often leads to being seen as someone who confuses fiction with reality. Yet that confusion was exactly the point of the whole story. The most unsettling question isn't whether Patrick Bateman was real, but if he's still active. Financial records suggest someone continues to use his investment strategies. Property records show apartments bought through the same shell companies found in the first investigation. Business cards matching those in the novel still turn up sometimes. They appear at crime scenes, subtle enough to avoid media attention, or are sent to people who investigate too deeply. What started as one man's troubling behavior has turned into something much more dangerous. It's a pattern, a method, maybe even an organization. The killings haven't stopped, they've just faded into the background of a society too distracted to see the signs. Every year, dozens of people disappear from areas near financial districts in major cities. Many are never found. The bodies that are recovered show consistent forensic signs: surgical precision,
clear evidence of careful planning and no usable DNA. The true horror of Patrick Bateman isn't that he existed, it's that he showed others how to exist. He taught them to navigate systems, to use wealth and status as perfect camouflage. He demonstrated how to become such a symbol of excess that true monstrosity goes unnoticed. He created a blueprint for predators that still works decades later. If you've watched true crime shows about serial killers from the 1970s and 80s, you might have been misled. The most active killer of that time didn't lurk in the shadows. He thrived in the spotlight, surrounded by excess, not poverty or isolation. The system that contained him, turning him into fiction, now protects those who follow in his footsteps. Some of you might recognize these patterns from your own lives. Maybe you've met someone whose humanity felt like an act, not real. Perhaps you've noticed coworkers describing the same person in conflicting ways.
Maybe you've felt watched while discussing this topic. These aren't just coincidences. The most chilling part of this story is that by reading it, you've now been added to the same monitoring systems. These systems track others who have pieced together these clues. Your digital footprint has been flagged. Algorithms are already analyzing your reaction to this information, determining if you pose a threat to their continued secrecy. Look around you. Check your doors and windows. Does anything seem a bit off? Are you hearing music that shouldn't be playing? Understand this. Somewhere, someone who learned from the original template might already have your business card. They could be tracing the lettering, perhaps contemplating a visit. Patrick Bateman's true story isn't that he was real. The real horror is that he never stopped being real. Fiction didn't contain him, it amplified him. Now, having read this, you are part of the story too. You've crossed the line from observer to participant. I've shared what I've learned at great personal risk. I don't know how much longer these words will be accessible. Information has a way of disappearing when it gets too close to this particular truth. If you've read this far, remember what you've learned. Notice the patterns. Stay aware of your surroundings. And if you receive a business card with raised lettering, pale colors, and a watermark, do not call the number. They already know where you are.